We're back with our guest, Ian Robertson. He is a partner at the Jefferson Hawthorne Group, talking about stakeholder capitalism. Ian, uh, before we get into you mentioned the backlash, and I do want to get into that, but give us your assessment of the impact of stakeholder capitalism. You mentioned the movement started in Canada around 2008. What's been the impact on Canadian business since that time?
Sure. Let me just do a little bit of a scene setter here. I've been blessed with the opportunity to spend many hours with hundreds of CEOs and directors. And the one thing that I've seen over and over again is them quietly indicating that our economic model just isn't working. They're trying their best to be wealth creators, but have almost been shamed into defending free market principles. I think if you look at what Donald Trump said at Davos, his speech made it very, very clear that there's a dividing line that's being drawn between the world's profit seekers and the world's profit takers. Canada now, I think, is going to have to choose. So what does that mean? I think we've reached a reflection point, an inflection point, and that what is coming with or without tariffs. I think tariffs has just accelerated this. You've heard all this economic hand wringing over, our challenges: productivity decline, lack of innovation, rising input costs, strain on housing supply. But there's been little root cause analysis of this, and it's very confusing for the average person. If we're a nation that's been so blessed with these vast natural resources and extremely highly educated population, why are we grappling with this anemic growth? Unless one understands what I call the unintended consequences of good intentions. And this is really where you come into stakeholder capitalism. It's placed obligations on companies, regulatory burdens. It's put guardrails on what they're able to do and not do. So, for example, if you're a company like Suncor Energy, you've really had to back off a lot of your development initiatives, capital initiatives, because you've had to go through what I call death by a thousand consultations. All of these regulatory hurdles that you need to get through, right? Bureaucrats directing what your business is able to do and not, right? As a consequence of that, it's underperformed its peers, as have many Canadian businesses. If you look at the flip side of that, take a company like ExxonMobil. They are very free to operate, and they have received orders from who I'll call the shareholder in chief to drill, baby, drill. So
Right.
that's the shareholder capitalist model. If you look at the state capitalist model, Sinopec, Russia's big oil companies supported by the state are not constrained by ESG, social concerns, any of these things, and they're drilling. So my concern is that the stakeholder model has really put a ring fence around Canada's ability to develop. And as the world polarizes, we're going to be exposed.
Yeah, no, I take your point, and it's clear since the Trump presidency part two has started that the pendulum has swung away from this model in the U.S. So that your analysis would indicate that that puts us at that impacts our competitive position vis-a-vis the United States. It's not just tariffs, it's not just other factors, but this in particular.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a student of history, as I know you are, Tony. And when I look back, it's pretty clear where this is going. The world is polarizing between the shareholder and state centric models, as you see the deglobalization set in, as it has many times throughout history. As a mid sized resource based economy that's dependent on global trade, we are being disadvantaged by subscribing to a system imposed by international bodies that restricts our ability to utilize our national advantages. And if you look at the cost benefits analysis, ideological purity has not been rewarded by the markets, right? Instead of clean, inclusive growth, the promise of stakeholder capitalism, Canadians are seeing deterioration in the standard of living. And that's a steep price to pay for like a marginal improvement on, income inequality, carbon emissions. And when I look at this, I think the reality is that history has repeatedly demonstrated that economies that are based on collective decision making inevitably collapse on themselves. And I'm worried that's where Canada's going.
So you see us transitioning back to a shareholder-led model then?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is not as difficult as some would make it seem. When I've had these conversations with those on the left side of the political spectrum, their immediate defense is, well, if we abandon stakeholder capitalism, we're not going to have a planet for our children. My concern is that if we don't abandon it, and soon, we're not going to have a country today. So here's what I mean by that. Canada can and should pursue social progress, environmental sustainability, inclusive growth, but these are best achieved through wealth creation that comes from putting shareholders first.
Right.
So I think Milton Friedman was right that a company's first social responsibility is to increase profits, and doing so over the long term, it must act in a responsible manner. If we fund social progress by generating a strong economy, things will benefit. I think the difference here is if you return to a shareholder concept, it's going to be governed by strong boards, not
Right.
regulators, right?
Right. Right.
It's going to integrate long-term stakeholder considerations because their reputations depend on it. Um,
Ian, we're just going to
it
take a
doesn't need
brief break. Hold that thought. We'll come right back to
to
you after our commercial messages. Please stay with us.